prepare for main engine start.
From the trenches of motorsports and Gearhead Central, this is RealTuners Radio, your all-motor, boosted, and nitrous-fed hour of power. Now, here's your hosts, the Reverends of RPM, the Faction of Traction, John Bewley, Scott Clark, Bill Fowler, Scott Evans, Mark Dahlquist, Mike Perduto, James Short, Tom Sewell, Brian Barnhill. This is RealTuners Radio.
Oh, good Wednesday evening, everybody. What's going on? Welcome back to RealTuners Radio. The episode, we're coming up on 140. I think this is 138, something like that. But thanks, everyone, for tuning in once again. Gosh, what's going on? Classes. There's 4 seats left now. 4 seats left to the November 7th and 8th Little Rock, Arkansas class. It's in Sherwood, Arkansas, on the north side of Little Rock. At Arkansas Performance Exhaust, again, November 7th and 8th. Should be pretty cool. They got a dyno right there in-house, so we'll have the class right there with the dyno on site. And we're also going to live stream that class. Both of those, you can check them out at realtuners.com. It's right there on the main page, live tuning classes. Excuse me. So, without further ado, let me unmute the rest of the crowd. Gentlemen, everyone was complaining to me that they don't like it as much because I make them mute and not talk now during the intro. What's your feedback on that?
It's not that we need to talk. We just need to talk crap about you while you're talking.
I know. I've actually cut in. If you listen to some earlier episodes, I've cut in and you can hear you guys talking shit. I'm like, okay. Go ahead. This is low budget production, man. You give me some credit. Anyway, so what's going on? You just got back from the Ducks race, man. You were talking about that's about the only thing that went on in the last 2 weeks. What? Give us the lowdown, the 5-minute review.
I think I'm going to blame COVID. I'm going to give Duck the benefit of the doubt, but the Sweet 16 and then No Mercy being weekend to weekend just made it too much for anybody, man. I mean, you got guys that were showing up Wednesday to race the Sweet 16 this weekend, and then some of them flew out to work a couple days, left the rig. Some of them just stayed to race No Mercy the very next weekend. I mean, there were guys that were there 12, 14, 15 days straight, dude, and it was just like I was just telling the guys in the background, I love that race from a networking perspective, from a seeing the racers, from watching
fun.
Cool I'll tell you, shit happen.
Best thing about that race is to go as a spectator. But
yes,
carry on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as someone that was working the race and working on a couple cars, I hate that race. It's too big. It's too sprawled out. There's too much going on. And I'm gonna say what no one wants to. Duck is doing what the reason he started this race, for those that don't know, is in Orlando. Carl Weisinger owned the track at the time, and he shoved the radio guys in the weeds. That's the whole park that shit in the weeds thing that Duck comes up with. He had Pro Mod parked up front and Pro Stock up front, or 10.5, whatever. And Duck is unfortunately doing the same thing. And I understand RVW is the show, and I understand Pro 275 is the show, and everyone else is now stuck out in the weeds. And unfortunately, he has come full circle on what started that race, and I think it's starting to bite him in the ass. So before I get my cease and desist letter, I'll stop right there.
I don't think you'll get a letter, not from Donald. You'll probably somebody will show up and hit you in the knees with a baseball bat or something.
Or I'll pop in one of his live feeds.
All right. You'll have a boating accident. Anyway. So, let's see. What else is going on here? I'm just kind of making sure everything looks like it's working. Can everybody hear us okay? I don't even have to click play on this. Okay. So
I got greetings from Augusta.
Nice. Nude tuners for the win. Man, Joe, I don't want to know.
In before Perduto, Kevin, you're going to have to get way earlier than that. I've been here for like 15, 20 minutes at this point.
Hey, what about our guys on YouTube? We have a neat little feature, a new YouTube feature tonight. Check it out. So we can actually, we don't have Facebook scraping message capture yet, but we've got the messages from YouTube displayed up on the stream where you can see what people are asking there. So Jerry, Joe, Jeff, Kenny Howard. I forget Green Mirror 555's actual name. John Rodabaugh is on here. Good to see all you guys. So now you can write cuss words really quick, and if we don't catch them, they'll show up on the stream on the YouTube chat. If you want your text to be seen and your question to be seen real time, get on the YouTube. Sign on to YouTube. Cool.
McMurtry's listening.
Justin, what's up? All
Yo,
right.
James. I don't know who the Kentucky Streets dude is, but I like that guy.
Oh, he's incognito
I like that guy
because of his employment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to say his name just because it's incognito.
Yeah, I don't want to get him in trouble. He's a good friend of ours. You would be surprised. So what else is going on? Who else wants anybody got questions? Shit, fire away. Anybody else got any current events that happened? Don't make my upcoming classes the only thing worth talking about. I mean, I got this, we're really in the early stages, but we're making this basically a homemade controller for a gas turbine engine to try to turn a Chinook helicopter into an automotive racing power unit. But that's probably the biggest thing I'm working on besides just tuning everybody's junk otherwise.
Dude, today was a tune crazy day. I don't know what happened, but I did 6 base startup files for freaking Terminators today.
Yeah, I'm getting hit up for Terminators every other day too. And a lot of it's just stupid shit.
I don't know where that came from or how, but whatever. I'll take it. Thanks,
Everybody,
guys.
it's a love-hate thing with the poor Terminator X, man, and it's such a good idea. But Holly's getting pounded.
I think it comes down to anytime you get something in that price range, you get a mix. So you get cars that are in that price range as well, and then you inherit every other mechanical problem in the car that was built to a budget as well.
Right.
Yes.
You know, Holly really hit the mark with where they were going for like the budget, right? But they missed out on a few key things. Like they should have just kept the software the same and made it a limited hardware instead of making it a completely different version. Like they could have very easily said, hey, here's the same software we've always had for everything, just now you're hardware limited, right? They could have just left it. Like there was zero reason to do what they did and use the same box without using the same hardware.
Yeah,
like
there's a couple annoying things.
J3 connector has 2 outputs that are predetermined that you can't do anything with. That like, okay, it's cool, whatever, but don't give me the whole connector. Make it a blank thing. If you're going to change the hardware inside, then at least make it so it's blank, so you don't think you can use that connector. I have people who call me all the time. Hey, how do I use these pins? You don't.
I don't know if it's because the firmware can't move to the software, because it definitely there's a couple things that it just feels like they wanted to make it easy, but the problem is when it doesn't work and you want to do it the way you know how to force it to work, you wind up basically swearing at the software to try to find a way around it.
Yes.
Right.
And James is asking how y'all liking Terminator. I love the Terminator from its base, easy to use standpoint.
I love the Terminator.
Yeah, as long as you buy the Terminator.
I love the Terminator.
I don't know what accent that was, but I like the Terminator X. I mean, I'm used to you guys. I came from the Megasquirt world, the guys that tried to commercialize that, and so I'm used to the support. But I mean, I just for the money, what you're getting, they broke new ground. Honestly,
no,
and it's definitely for the money. It's great, but that doesn't like it's kind of the problem is you wind up with the same thing if you got guys with $20,000 engine builds that are trying to skip out on the ECU, and there's just times just because it works doesn't mean it's right. You know, anything can run an ECU, run an engine.
It's not a universal application for everything. For the guy that just wants to put an LS in his S10 and drive down the road, it's great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a ton of swap guys.
Yeah,
like,
that's absolutely perfect for that. That's exactly what I recommend.
You can't beat it for that.
They're so funny too. They're like, man, it's just like a stock LS with a cam out of a junkyard swapped into a whatever. I'm like, no, these are fun as hell to tune that combo and make them run like stock, you know.
Yep. As long as the guys realize that the base maps are a joke and that that self-learning is almost as much of a joke.
It's all right. I mean, it's not a joke. It's they tried their best given the situation. It's hard to build a library.
I get what it is, and it's the biggest headache, the biggest hurdle, and I guess kind of like scary moment for people of adopting a standalone is they feel like they're trying to start the car and they have nowhere to go.
Why do we have no video from you, Brian? Are you breastfeeding right now?
No, so I loaned a bunch of my camera mounts to the guys at the shop. So I actually should post a video that I don't know if I posted it. We did the media day with the new Ariel Atom 4. A car that's been sort of making my life a pain in the ass for the past couple of weeks. But we didn't have it. Was literally leaving, and we're like, we don't want to drill holes in this brand new bodywork. We don't know where to mount this AIM Smarty Cam, part of our data acquisition setup. So I wound up, we actually had our podcast the night before the car was supposed to go to the track. And as I'm setting up my camera, I realized I use a sticky mount, GoPro mount that has the same thread as our AIM camera. And I've noticed that on the setup. So I call the guys at the shop. I was like, hey, I'll bring this by in the morning. And they unloaded it from the trailer, and it's been sitting in my toolbox at the shop for 2 weeks. And I just forgot to bring it back. So
that's interesting. Sorry, I'm sitting here playing with my mute button. So check this out. Did you see this? We got a couple of interesting messages come by here. Jerry3567. I just built a test bench for screwing with and calibrating sensors from third parties. Dominator and a 12.3 dash for, and what does it say? HMI. Only thing new here in Millstat, your guy's fault. That's pretty cool, actually. I like that.
Is HMI Hemi spelled without the E, or does it stand for something else?
I don't know.
Human machine interface.
Okay.
Ooh.
Wow.
It's that's what we use in the OEM world for a term as well.
It makes us look smart.
That's like the phrase we used to use, legacy fleshware.
Okay.
That was old guys at work. I'm really interested in what anybody knows about this 331 mile an hour Shelby
SSC. Yeah, Shelby supercar or whatever. What's the story on that? Anyone? I've got to admit, I'd have to Google that.
Don't know the details. My problem with all the SSC stuff is they've always built it as the whatever fastest production car, whatever, and they're barely a production car, if even. So
I mean, it's going to be it's a fabricated chassis car. It's not going to be a production style thing yet, or anywhere near it. And they'll build 3 of them or 4 of them. I mean, I hope they build a million of them.
Oh, we unseated the Koenigsegg, but that's a true production car,
right?
Yes, it costs $1.5 million, but
sure. No, but they still make them on an assembly line. You know, there's going to be a couple hundred of them at least.
Koenigsegg's?
Yeah.
Well, there's a dealer here, but they always have one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you sell one a year, and you're doing well. You're making $1 million a year.
Right. So, no, we don't know much else about that car other than it had a Tom Nelson.
It's
with the
like a 1,700 horsepower.
No, seriously,
racing engine?
It did. It had a Nelson motor with the mirror image turbos, and it was fancy looking. But
it's a flat plane V8 from Nelson. So I know it's flat plane. I know it's built by Nelson. Yeah, twin turbo, and I know it's 1,700, 1,800 horsepower.
It lasted for 2
on E85. Yep,
getting there.
It lasted for 2 pulls, and somebody got the arrow right enough for it not to fly by itself at that kind of mile an hour.
Yeah, they were saying there was more in it, but the winds were making it dangerous.
That's like when we were out there with Dan Parker, just going, 130, 140 mile an hour with a 25 mile an hour steady crosswind. That was too much. It was sketchy. Nobody was going any faster than that. It's kind of funny, but the wind can mess that up. But yeah, that still seems pretty damn fast to me. Almost like just crazy. I mean, I guess they survived. They didn't kill themselves. That's good. But because it's hard to find a stretch of pavement that's smooth, that's truly level and smooth. Just the slightest undulation at 250 miles an hour plus, and it feels like, you're running on a rough ground. And
we have a completely flat surface within 0.2 of an inch for a quarter mile worth here in Vegas.
Right.
And with an uphill at the end.
About as good as I can give you.
Someone
Koenigsegg came out here to run because they had the straightest stretch of road in the U.S. to be able to do it on. They went to set their whatever 270 some odd mile an hour record that they did out here just west of Vegas.
I understood that road they were on is the same part of the road that they use for the Silver State. Is that not correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So it must be a pretty nice road all in.
It's a nice road, and it's a long, long straightaway. Many people have been busted by the cops out there because it's a very long straightaway, and it's just asking for you to put your foot down. You know, many driving awards.
Being asked if a Dominator is better on a turbo streetcar than a Terminator. That's not – turbo streetcar doesn't begin to explain to us what would make that decision. The number of engine notes, what you want the car to do.
How many inputs and outputs
of your ECU.
What injector
so let's get down to some
right?
Yeah,
hold on, let's get down to some brass tacks of one big thing that is important for a turbo car that might be doing boost control, which is how the control is done. And the difference being that the Dominator can do true dome control, where the Terminator is dome control only, and you can't add manifold pressure to it, where the Dominator, you can add the map pressure into it as a feed forward system.
Didn't they
where
fix
you can
that? Have
figure out the rates.
No, they did not. And now they said they were going to. Okay, hang on. There's a screenshot of a message with Holley tech support that said they were going to add it, and now the official word from Holley is they're not going to add it.
Yep.
Because that one should be the other way around.
Just,
the Terminator X should have just a single solenoid PWM output control.
Here's the thing I think Holley realized, and I love the Terminator X because, and like I was saying, I love the Terminator X as long as people that buy it understand that they're buying the basic system. Please don't expect it to make your 450 race car have wheelie control and all the other nonsense that we do with the Dominators. But I think they're having to cut back on what it can do to separate the Terminator, the HP, and the Dominator.
They've hurt their sales on the other two units. Yeah, they've hurt their sales on their other two units. They had to go. They can't make.
And dealers getting upset because they make $100 on one instead of.
I hadn't thought about
being able
that.
to make some real money.
I'm not a dealer. I don't deal. You guys all sell hardware. I don't sell hardware.
No money on a Terminator. I was actually.
Blake said the same thing.
I do the.
Yeah, if you sell it at the website prices that they do, you make like $78 or something.
Yeah.
There's no room for the dealer to make any money on them. So when you call and ask somebody for a discount on a Terminator, you're just asking them to give you something for free because they're not making much money off of you. They might make $3 off of you.
I'm not gonna diss the Terminator, man. I love those things because I'm that's the bulk of the model of ECU that I'm tuning right now, and that changed when it came out.
We're not knocking it. It's more so people need to realize what the limitations are. Making sure it goes to the right application.
The worst thing about that crowd is that they show up with the super dirt cheap injectors.
Yes.
That's the worst thing about that whole situation is you show up with, they're literally I'm even going to call them manufacturers. Brands of injectors. Yeah. I think we get every set. I can find something wrong with every single set of 8. I think we get down to the point that people are choosing the wrong places to cut their budget, right? Everybody goes, I want to build a fast race car. I have X amount of dollars to do. And they start planning out, well, I don't want to blow up an engine, so I spend a few more dollars here. But they start cutting money in places that they shouldn't cut, There are lots of ways to cut money in doing things, Do some of the work yourself. Even if it's maybe you don't know how to do wiring, but maybe you do a little bit of YouTube research and you learn and you try some things and maybe you get it, maybe you don't, right? But maybe it's worth having somebody at least pay for their expertise and helping you get the right thing. Maybe you can't pay a full shop to do wiring, but you could certainly pay for consultation on wiring. That would be considerably less and then do the wiring yourself. Buying the hardware is by far the easiest part. Pick pieces, put them together, call it good. Everybody can do something with anything. Might not be ideal, but anybody can pick stuff. The big problem is people go, oh, well, I can't afford the good injectors, so I'm going to buy cheap ones. I'm going to buy some from China. I'm going to buy these eBay decap something or others, just because they want to save a few dollars when that should be considered part of the engine that could be the problem that costs you an entire engine worth of money instead of something that is
say a simple fix. Oh, I bought some cheap relays instead of good relays for my control of on and off of things. And, there's different ways to save money.
I'm looking back.
Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the questions like I should be.
No, someone asked what the thoughts are on the Nelson intake, and the response was it comes with a Nelson price tag.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't know how well tested it is. If it was designed by somebody like Caleb, if they brought in a third-party designer to make the airflow good, then I'd like it.
I'm with you on that, because if Nelson did it himself, no comment.
I mean, that's an engine. It's hard to design. A really good intake is how it performs, not how it looks. And if I've just seen, like in the pro mod world, I've seen tons of fabricated custom cool intakes of many different designs. It just worked horribly. So, my thing is I want it to work great first and then make it look cool.
I like that phrase. It's how it performs, not how it looks. I've been telling girls that my whole life. Sorry.
God, someone's asking, has anyone seen a new direct injection Terminator X yet? I have not.
Nope, I haven't played with one either, and I don't know that I'll ever see one. I'm curious. Brian,
I'm getting some resto mod guys that are looking at, now that the crate engines are out, that they're looking at them because they wanted to run the GM swap package. I mean,
how much is the crate engine?
I don't know. I remember I looked it up. So
what's the retail on that? I'm curious.
LT4.
I bet Jerry knows, or somebody over here on YouTube knows. Pro Stock John might know.
Yeah, we did that mid-60s Malibu that had the LS3 in it, and that was on a Fast XFI Sportsman, actually.
Okay.
And he said, "Oh, he's got a C10 that he's doing a big build on that wants us to do a bunch of stuff." He's like, "Yeah, I've already ordered an LT4 for it, but I think I want to get rid of the GM crate cruising connect stuff because he wants to do some more power and stuff with it." So I might see a Terminator or something on that, just because DI. And that's the first thing I told him is like, you would have been better. We should have bought, if you want a supercharger, we should have bought a supercharged LSA and just done away with the direct injection. But he already has the engine, so.
The guy that has the Terminator X coming for his DI truck says Scott's welcome to log in and play anytime he wants to.
I don't know if I want to mess with that. I want to see a couple of those working first.
Well, I'm
the conservative one of the group. Everybody, these other guys are like, fuck yeah, let's jump in and do it. I'm like, I want to watch and understand it first.
I'm going to lean on James. I mean, the way he's got my truck running on a stock ECM, I figured he's got that stuff figured out.
I was actually going to comment on that a second ago because the biggest hurdle for the Terminator X stuff is going to be injector phasing and timing. We did a lot of testing. I can
tell some stories about that right now. Yeah.
We did a lot of testing, in the last year, and the injector phasing can make a plus or minus 10 horsepower difference within 10 degrees of injector timing. And the injector timing greatly changes, depending on the fuel demand and the fuel pressure you have the high pressure pump set to, because it does everything start of injection instead of end of injection. So
the Type R setup that we have in this Atom saw with that was part. I might get yelled at for saying this, but that was part of the issue we were having. The cowl wasn't right and the injector timing was wrong. When I looked at the math, they did their math backwards. So we were spraying after the flame front started. But even getting it close, a 20-degree change in injector timing picked up 34 horsepower, I think.
To add to this, to clarify, remind people, we're talking about direct injection, correct?
Yeah, GDI.
Yes, direct injection.
Not standard port injection, because standard port injection, while it does make some gains, it's only good until you're spraying, until the valve is open and closed for less time than you're spraying. If your injector's open for a lot longer than the valve is, you see a change in gains immediately. Like there's a point where it tops off and stops making more from injector timing on a standard overhead injector style through the port style versus direct injection, which is directly inside the cylinder.
Yeah.
A lot more control.
Typically on DI, I think we were targeting something like 2 or 3 milliseconds before the start of the ignition event to have our injection. And And in some cases we were so not just the timing, but the phasing and how many squirts we do as well. Because there's sometimes we would purposely, or we tested it, we wound up not doing it in production, spraying a little bit as the flame front starts, so you can get one mixture that makes the flame front move a certain way, but then spray more fuel into it and change the way it moves. The problem is that's really bad for emissions. That's what we found out doing it that way. So yeah, very, very different on DI. But yeah, that LT4 crate is $14,700 for just the engine, $18,300 if you want their connect and cruise package with the ECU and all that stuff.
Well, LT4.
So they don't want to sell them.
I bet I won't ever see one of those combos.
I know a guy that already bought one.
I mean, you might.
You
get some fringe guys, but
that's if it's LT4, that's the supercharged combo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a 700 horsepower crate motor. That's actually cheap.
Yeah, but I would rather put a supercharged LSA because I've made well into the sevens on those.
Oh god,
they're all have to deal with the direct injection
angle again.
GDI sucks.
God, they're all asking about injector end angle again, and I'm not going down that road with your.
Port injection doesn't matter. I won't say it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. It does a little bit sometimes, but only. I mean, man, I had to be on an engine dyno to figure it out, like with Dahlquist, and I've done that routine with Mark on here. I've done it with Brad Nagel. Who else? Is anyone else on here?
Again, it matters when you have an injector that is spraying for less time than the valve is open. And that's about it, which means for most people, low RPM, it helps with a little bit of torque. And above that, you don't see the gains until you're trying to scrape every last little 0.3 of a horsepower out to win an Engine Masters Challenge.
And you're not going to get it you're not going to get it on an entry-level chassis dyno either. You're not even going to get it on an any chassis dyno. You're going to do it on an engine dyno.
Yeah, you'll see. Usually the only time I really start messing with injector timing on a port engine is low RPM drivability and throttle response.
It's too bad all you put
and you can help with the smell of fuel.
Come on.
You can help with the smell of fuel at idle a little bit with injector timing by changing it around. And you can help with emissions a little bit at idle by doing that, but it's small amounts.
Jesse, you keep mentioning the Turn 14 car. I know it's Coyote based. I'm going to assume it's dual injection. I'm going to assume it's got direct injection and port. I have not seen under the hood of the car. I don't know the car well enough. Yes, I know it very well in X275.
So they actually based it on a Gen 3 motor? That's a surprise.
I had a long talk with some guys at the FuelTech booth at the race, and they are 100% in support of DI being the future, and that's the way the performance world is going to go.
Wow, do we agree with that statement, guys? Because
no chance.
Window that we've got left.
No chance. GDI was stupid to start with. I got hassled by so many engineer snobs.
They don't make any.
They're going to need a massive change of the pumps.
Power.
Yeah, it's not. You can't afford to up the power level.
They don't make a big enough injector that's worth a shit that can supply enough fuel. Unless they start putting 2 injectors per cylinder or something.
The diesel guys. Yeah. The diesel guys have already built a GDI injector for the LT head that will make over 1,500 wheel. It's there. It's available. It's just, do you want to pay for it? You got to realize none of this is different than a diesel injector. All these parts are available and easy to have.
The thing that's a little bit different about the gas stuff from the diesel world, though, you just freaking open the nozzle and pour it too on a diesel. Whereas the gas, you actually have to meter that shit consistently.
Yeah.
To get a decent air fuel ratio. It doesn't matter if it smokes a little bit on a diesel, but.
And a diesel, if you put in too much, it's just like methanol. It's got about the same tuning window. Okay, so it smoked a little bit.
Plus, the fuel location on the DI stuff is extremely important.
Critical. The charge motion, the mixture motion is absolutely critical. In fact, the chambers are designed to be efficient at a certain RPM and load, and that's in the emissions testing area, right? Everywhere else, they're actually dirtier. Go look at the tailpipe of any rental car that has the fleet of rental cars out right now, the cheap ones that have all the GDI motors in them, and it's from the domestic manufacturers, even the Kia, the Hyundai, the Toyotas, whatever. Everybody's cheap car that has GDI, go look at the tailpipe. It's charcoal black nasty. You can rub it off your finger. It's disgusting. That the actual particulates coming out of those things when people are driving them like normal people are horrible. So I
probably change the name of the podcast to Real Injector End Angle Tuners.
Yes.
I think the problem with DI is we did see an increase in performance of OEM vehicles because they could get performance and still hit emissions. But the problem is it's built it into this little narrow channel now where, yeah, it's great in that OEM world and you can push it a little bit, but the DI stuff is it's a much bigger wall to climb over. And I think that's going to be, and there's too many other issues. I think that's going to be the issue in adopting it widespread outside of just using it to, learn how to tune it so we can tune our current production cars.
On top of that, the thing I've noticed that I don't know if there's a solution for yet is simply that the DI motors require more maintenance because the injectors are right in there collecting soot. They get dirty really quick, and you have to keep up on maintenance of them. And right now, it ain't cheap to do maintenance on a DI vehicle.
Yeah, so water injection to help keep the valves clean has been adopted by BMW and a few others. But yeah, the injectors, it's going to be like a diesel. You got to have the injectors clean from time to time.
So that's a crutch. That's if they're having to do water injection, that's just a crutch and that much more.
Well,
Ford does the dual injection setup. They do port and DI.
Yeah, so that's how the BRZ and a lot of stuff was. You just want something to spray off the valve, spray over the valve, so it keeps the valve clean, so you don't get oil coating on the valve.
Is there anybody that's made
and carbon buildup?
Is there anybody besides our good friend Doug Cook who's actually made an LT4 go down the track with any consistency?
It wasn't even direct injected.
No,
I
it
understood
was.
originally that it was a mixture. Is that just completely gone now? The DI stuff is totally off it?
He's gotten rid of the DI now, but his fastest time so far was with the DI running. I know because I was helping him tune it.
That's
did he have,
so is he doing DI
port on it too?
Top?
He did. We had supplemental port as well.
Yeah.
And we were slowly migrating things over, like the spark, the throttle control. In the end, it was I think it was just that drove the GDI injectors to a certain limit, and most of it was leaning on the port injection to run good. But he would run the GDI injectors up to their whatever duty cycle they started getting weird at or having fuel pressure problems, and then we'd do the rest with supplemental port. It was pretty cool. He had some guys that were HP tuners gurus helping out on it, and they were learning too. But I mean, we fucked around with that thing for the longest time, trying to get the throttle to go wide open and stay wide open and stuff like that. And finally just did control with the Holly, I think it was. Or no, we did a cable throttle. That's what we did. But anyway.
Hey guys, there was a question from Jake Hildebrandt earlier about version numbers in Terminator, and this is a tangential my question to this, but if I understood the conversation earlier correctly, it sounded like you said that the Terminator was being decontented. In other words, the newer versions have actually less features or less capability than the original versions in order to make a more distinct separation between them and the upper level products. Is that correct? Is that what we believe to be the case?
I wouldn't say decontented. There was a screenshot where Holly said they were going to add map-based boost control to the Terminator. And we've heard of other things they talked about adding to the Terminator that now they say they're not going to add. I think the plan...
I thought it was a mistake, actually, that they commented out the wrong line of code or something, but... Could be me. Because why would you not have single solenoid fixed duty cycle?
Right. I actually would have imagined they did it the other way, where the Terminator X would only do map based and not do dome control.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, like an open loop type.
Agreed.
3-port.
Because for 90% of my stuff, we don't do dome control.
Yeah, most street cars don't need dome control.
Nope.
Right.
Especially like your run of the mill turbo LS stuff. A lot of the dome control stuff is really only needed if you're trying to do like 4, 5, 6 times whatever the wastegate spring is on a race car or something.
Yes.
Most street cars are going to roll around with a 10-pound spring. Well, you can easily, depending on the turbo, get at least 2 to 3 times the spring with just a single 3-port duty cycle based solenoid.
Yeah, if you do a top bottom setup on your wastegate, we've done 3 times the spring without an issue.
Yeah, it really depends on the turbo and how much back pressure, yada yada. But your typical S400 based,
right?
5.3 combo, you can easily go 3 times what the wastegate spring is.
Do they still sell the middle level kit, or is it now just
I like the
HP or Dominator?
The HP. I like the HP more than Terminator personally.
I mean, because it'll record data on board.
Yes, that is the biggest thing for me. I feel like I'm dealing with a race pack, but I'm taking cards in and out and popping them in my laptop and popping them back out. And
so is there James just made an interesting point about that. So is there a sort of set of criteria for people that are looking at this, about, their planned deal and how to make a good, solid decision between Terminator X or saving up their shekels for the Dominator or HP?
What do you want the ECM to control in your race car or in your car?
I think everybody should start off with the low end. I think everybody should start off with the low and then understand it. All those Holley ECUs have good resale value, even though I am not a proponent of buying used electronics. They have good resale value. Like the HPs get like 75 to 85% used of their retail price.
Well, the HPs are the funny one because what happens is the guys that bought the Terminator and maybe they just started to push out of the realm of the Terminator what it can do, they can grab that HP and it's a plug and play change. Literally, don't even have to rewire the car. Unplug the ECM, plug the HP in, and the car runs.
Okay, yeah.
Is it not the same for the Dominator?
No, it's the same for the Dominator, but you're talking.
Jesus, what happened to James? He's drinking.
Yeah. You're talking $500, $800, $1,000 more used new, depending on how they're buying. But the HP makes for a quick, easy change and move.
I never have to think about this stuff. Not too much because most of the time people are coming to me with, all right, that's not really learning itself. This thing's not running right. Happy to pay you just to help. And no problem. That's where we step in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one is always, take a look at the I/O. And, if you've already, with your current setup, you're maxing out your inputs and outputs, it's not far-fetched you're going to outgrow that. So, street car, basic, you just want to take a car down the track or, grassroots level drift car, they're good in. Anything competition, the logging really bites you. The lack of logging, the lack of extra features and flexibility.
The Terminator is going to give you, in a basic drag car, bump, boost control, trans brake, your basic stuff. If you want anything more than that, just go bigger from the word go.
Yeah, you want any safeties? Well, the thing that's
number of IOs.
It is the thing that I like about the HP that you get with that extra price though is the ability to run low impedance injectors. You have better injector drivers. You have internal logging.
Yep.
And there was something else that I've done lost my train of thought now.
Well, it used to be only the HP.
You get better engine protection and safeties, right?
Yeah.
Can you guys unpack that a little bit more, just for everybody that might not understand what that means?
Well, the HP used to be the only one besides the Dominator that would can back and forth. You can grab some extra I/O off your screen. They added that to the Terminator as well now, where it'll can back and forth. But I think it only works on this. So people not making it work on the 12, or it doesn't work on the 12. You got to be on a 686 or something on those lines. There was something.
Yeah, it's firmware dependent. I can't remember. So it's always going to, and it comes back with the hardware. And that's where I think it's the firmware limitations in the ECU. And I think that gets back to why it runs a different software.
Hooray, Chris Stewart. I just saw Chris Stewart's post about they need to add test modes. That is some bullshit. That needs to be in there.
That's true for a bunch of ECUs, to be honest.
God, totally agree with that.
Because Stewart's a builder and an installer and a turnkey guy, and he is right there with me as far as, man, if I got to test, if you're the guy that takes a car from quote unquote complete and done and out of the shop, but still had to get pushed out on a trailer because it quote just needs a tune, man, fucking test outputs. Gotta have the outputs.
That saves my
one of
ass so
the
many
big
times.
reasons one of the big reasons I changed was because of lack of test modes and lack of updates that many people were requesting.
Don't let the Mega Squirt guys make you look stupid. Put some.
If you're gonna do a test mode, don't have a non-op firmware you have to load in and then go back.
Right.
Thanks,
they told me that's
AEM.
what it would take.
That's what AEM does. You have to load a non-operational firmware.
Someone
did a lot of
Mega
Squirt gang sign.
Oh, Mega Squirt gang sign. All right. I'm like, what's he doing?
A lot of things you can.
FuelTech versus Holley Terminator, and why are we comparing which FuelTech first off? Because you're taking the very bottom of the barrel Holley and just blankly comparing it to FuelTech. What FuelTech?
To me, FuelTech is not a street car ECU. It's a methanol, maybe race gasoline with the right injectors, but mainly a methanol forced induction, maybe nitrous controls ECU that's very simplified, doesn't have barometric correction or anything built into the street stuff that you're going to want. Very, very simple. It doesn't have a fuel model, no VE model. So it's not.
It's a big blower pro mod ECU.
Yeah, really it is. It's just a simplified system that works great with big, dumb race engines, you know?
It's a pulse width controller.
Yeah, it's a table of pulse widths, yep.
Hey, to provide context, Jeff Bonifield says, with all the information and how do people not go Dominator, can anybody just off the top of their head, what is the map price on a Terminator X versus an HP versus a Dominator?
So an X is, I think they're still at $999. We'll call it $1,000 for an X, and that's standard LS, no drive-by-wire, no transmission control, with a harness. A Dominator, just the ECU, starts at $2,122
plus harnesses.
I think with a harness, you're in the $3,000 range.
30.
Yeah, you're usually about $3,000 after you do everything.
3,400 will get you a basic Dominator setup at map price.
Yeah, I think a basic setup's like $3,102 or something.
Yeah,
I was just looking because they just updated their price sheet, and I gotta work
for the 27th time this year.
Yeah, dude, that's driving me nuts. I feel like every 2 weeks. So an HP,
the big benefit though? The big benefit of going Dominator though is immediately you already have the availability of drive-by-wire, transmission control. You've got
two
a bunch more functionality to it. Right?
Dual
Two widebands
way more inputs and outputs.
versus a Terminator X, which is basically an even dumber down. That like HP is above a Terminator X, and Terminator X is like the dumbed down version of an HP.
So it's basically it's about $1,000 step Terminator, $1,000 to $1,200 Terminator to HP, and then another $1,000 to $1,200 from HP to Dominator.
The wideband alone is why I don't like the Terminator X personally. I'm not a fan of a 4.9 sensor.
No.
And the
They have that stupid adapter to go with it.
Yeah.
Like, why do I want to put an adapter in line? Why not just give me the right plug on the harness to begin with?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's and not that I like any of the Holley wiring, but the Terminator harness is definitely the bottom.
Well, you either have to buy a tuning cable or you buy it, with the tuning cable and don't get the screen too. So, that's the other thing. You just have to spend $50 more to get a tuning cable, which I've bought one for the shop here just, because people come in and, don't have it. And I'm like, well, how do I tune this thing without a cable?
I actually have 3 now, and I'm wondering who I screwed on giving theirs back to because I don't know why I have 3 in my bag.
Well, that means you did a good enough job because he hasn't had to connect to it yet.
You're going to get all kinds of PMs now. And, hey, you got my cable.
So Chris Stewart makes a question here. It says, are the coil and injector drivers any different from the Terminator compared to the HP or the Dominator? Quote, got to have cheaper parts in it. I can't comment.
Coil drivers are the same because it's smart coils, right? So it's designed to drive smart coils. So either you're using their little 4-channel dumb coil driver that they make for like 4 dumb coils that only 2-wire or any 2-wire coil, or you're driving it like an LS that has a 5-volt trigger that shorts the ground in order to fire the smart coil.
It has an igniter or a power transistor built in. Yeah. That's what makes the coil smart. It's not actually the IGN-1As. The LS coils are smart too. Some of the Audi coils are smart. Mark's used some of those weird ones on his Engine Master stuff.
Really, the difference is in the injector drivers, because you're looking at injector drivers in the Terminator X that can only do a high impedance injector, basically, or a peak and hold injector.
Yep, and it does have cheaper components. The cheaper components are going to be the lack of you don't have a function for writing data logs and retrieving data logs. That takes out some cost, and also there's no memory on board to have to write logs and retrieve them from.
Yeah, I mean it's a much cheaper processor, if I recall, as well.
I would guess, yeah.
So guys, have we produced a document, a webinar, or something else that people could go to answer this question of, should I get a Terminator X or an HP or a Dominator? Because it seems like that would be really
useful. They're already out there. Google and actually do
times.
They're already out there. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube.
Yeah,
making a Holley tuning book.
Which ones are good?
I'm working on it. I'm like perpetually 85% there. I just got that thing back out the other day. It's funny you mentioned that.
I think if you're doing it between ECUs in the same family, it's okay, but we're back to every time this comes up and we start bench racing ECUs, it always turns into just a bullshit contest. Because like there's so much stuff this doesn't answer. Because like, when do you go to, and this comes up every time we talk about this, like someone's already said FuelTech, when you go HalTech, when you go this, when you go that, and there's so much that's never going to be answered in the in just the straight IO and the bench, the spec sheet racing, basically. So what we always called it when I worked with the HalTech guys is, if you're going to spec race an ECU, there's stuff that looks like it's better bang for the buck, but then you go and use it. And like some of them are ECUs I like the ECU Master Black isn't a bad ECU, and bang for the buck, it has way more IO than any of the HalTech stuff for the dollar. But I can also tell you that the cars I've tuned with that took twice as long and had not nearly as much flexibility. The software is just not laid out as nice. They don't have built-in logging. That's part of it.
That's interesting.
So you can only PC log. The recalls on the logs aren't as nice.
No one's ever brought me one to tune, an ECU master. That's Zach Denny. I know who he is.
So Zach's a good dude. It's good stuff, but it's just there's ways that you have to save money. You can't sell $1,000 ECU and not save money somewhere. And at the end of the day, can you get a good tune on it? And it was perfect for the car we used it on. And there's big dollar, big horsepower builds that run it, and it's fine. But it's not as easy to use, and there's going to be some limitations you run into, and especially if you're either trying to turn so many cars over a day as a tuner, or you're not an experienced tuner and the software is a little more cumbersome to use or whatever. There's a bunch of stuff that comes up like that.
The biggest thing to look at though is IO. Because most all the ECUs will pretty much do anything you need it to do this day and age, unless you have like a niche application or something that, in my old route stick shift stuff, for instance, like I would prefer a HalTech over anything just because of all the, stick shift features that it has. Yeah, there's people going fast. Heck, most of the fastest cars right now are on a Holly still, but it can be done either way.
I think you need to look at IO, but don't get caught up in it. You need to make sure that the ECU has the IO you need with room for extra, so you're not maxed out. But that also doesn't mean that because this ECU has, 20% more IO for, less cost, that doesn't make it a better ECU. You don't need the one with more IO. You need enough IO to do what you're going to do, and then you need the features and the functionality and the ease of use for
Jay Blanchard
whatever
has a good point, man. It goes back to what your tuner wants to do. If you're going to be your own tuner, call us. We'll help you out with whatever you do. But most of them are going to start with Terminator X. I don't mind the upgrade path thing because Holly makes it pretty easy to upgrade. You can get pretty good money for those things.
Yeah, and I guess
just remember,
depends, Well, that's I guess
remember,
that's a point.
Buy once, cry once.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If you're at the point where saving a little bit now is going to help you, and you're okay spending the money more later, the Terminator X. But if you know that you're going to buy it, like I know guys that'll buy it and be like, well, I already own this, and they'll hang on to it forever.
Dude, I know guys that bought ECUs and their project went 4 years late, and now they got something obsolete. So, I like spending less now, maybe get something that was cool and new and hot 2 or 3 years ago. Like, I won't buy a Nexus until probably another year, a season or two. I wouldn't be really actively recommending that stuff. I like to wait until hardware's been out for a while, but I also like the start off cheap, resell it, move around. Don't do too crazy of overkill because there's too many projects that don't utilize what they spend all that money on all the time.
Well, I guess it comes back to be realistic in everything when you start your project. If you can't afford the ECU you need, then you can't afford the engine you're doing, which means you may need to rethink your project. And I think that's the problem. People they jump into a project before they figure out a budget. I know it sucks to add stuff up. And we always say don't add it up. But if you don't, then you're going to get to the point where you can't afford to finish your car.
Well, the internet will lead you to believe for $750 you can have a 1,200 horse 5.3 in your car.
Yeah, you want to see the $30,000 E30 we have sitting in our shop right now that still isn't even bolted together?
Yeah, believe me, I get it, and that's the problem with people. Here's what I want you guys to do, the people listening right now. When someone's out there giving you information like, oh, I did it this way or I did it that way, ask for pictures. Ask for pictures with like their name written on it where they actually did it. I want to see how many people actually did it versus how many just say, oh, I went 490s with a stock bottom end 5.3. Cool, post a timestamp.
Post a video.
Yeah, anything. Like, God, that bugs the shit out of me. Sorry.
Neil Richards had a point. I mean, I figured most of our listeners probably already know the difference between high and low impedance injectors, but low impedance injectors draw a lot more current, so they take a lot more hardware and a lot more expense to make an ECU that can support them. High impedance injectors, which are the modern Bosch and Siemens Decas and the anything high impedance has a faster moving, lighter weight internals to the injector. It's a more modern design. I'm a fan of high impedance injectors. I'd rather you see two high impedance injectors per cylinder on an application that needs it than one 700-pound injector or whatever. So
yeah,
right.
I'm okay.
If you don't know what you have, put a
ohm meter on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Put it on.
I found in my experience has been that the low impedance injectors tend to have faster off times as well versus the higher impedance injectors, right? It's just a physical load that's happening there. High impedance, more resistance, it's harder to open. It's not saying it's true for all of them, but a large majority of them, low impedance tends to be faster at opening. From what I've seen, they all have faster offset times. Right?
If only we had a fuel injector guy on the show.
Right?
That's just what Thomas to bring him out. Come home and talked about fuel injectors after that's what he lives all day.
I can answer whatever you want. I mean, really, the answer is one is what's called a peak and hold injector, which is typically your low impedance injector. What happens is on those injectors and those drivers that need that, so you'll have they'll call it a 4 amp, 1 amp, and what that does is, so for the first millisecond that they open it, they'll send an extra high current, which will be like 4 amps to open the injector faster, and it'll hold it for 1 millisecond or 2 milliseconds, however long you specify in your ECU. It'll hold that, and then once that's over, it'll drop the current back down. So on a 4 amp, 1 amp, it's 4 amps for the hold for the beginning, and then it drops it down. For the peak, it's 4 amps, and then it drops it down and it holds it for the rest of the duration. So if you have a 6 millisecond time, it holds it at 1 amp for the last remaining time of the injector opening time. So if you have 6 milliseconds and it's 4 amp, 2 amp, so the first millisecond or two will be 4 amps, and then the current actually drops down to 1 amp for the last 4 milliseconds, and then it drops down. This is a trick that I do that not a lot of people know. You can actually run a high impedance injector in a low impedance system. I do it on my own personal cars. It actually makes a lot of the injectors
makes them snappy,
more responsive. Yep, there's no reason not to do it. So, and a lot of the old ECUs, the 80 stuff that you've seen, Honda stuff, anything that had resistor boxes and all that, that wasn't there for the injector. That was actually there to save the driver in the computer. You know what I mean? So it had nothing to do with the injector itself.
So you're saying, let me clarify that real fast.
Yeah.
So you're saying you run your high impedance injectors with the ECM set up in low impedance injector mode?
Yes, sir.
I just want people to hear that because it was kind of muffled when you said it.
Yeah, I'm not telling you have to do it, but you can do it. It does make the injector more responsive. It has nothing to do with the injector being more responsive. It's the fact that those injectors now have a better current, helping them out. So
it makes the fuel delivery more predictable.
Exactly. What it does is it opens and closes that magnetic field in the injector faster.
Oh my God, my whole understanding of the universe has changed.
Explosion. There's enough fires in California, Bill. Knock that off.
And so I said, since we're finishing this conversation, so the high impedance injector, what happens is it doesn't have that peak at the beginning. It just sends out that 1 amp current. So if it's 6 milliseconds, it opens it to 1 amp and then holds it 1 amp the whole time. And then it drops down and closes the injector. It's actually pretty simple. Typically, what you'll see is low impedance injectors are usually 2-3 ohms, and then high impedance injectors are usually anywhere from 9 to 12 ohms. So that's the easy way to check. Just get out your meter and check and see, what you got. because if you do put a high or a low impedance injector in a high impedance system, you will burn the driver.
Oh, you'll screw up the drivers, yeah. If you have a high current
And it
injector.
won't happen right away. It won't happen in like 10 seconds. It'll be when you're driving down the road in 3 hours.
Or when you're trying to run some high duty cycle, load them up.
Yeah, it's similar to when you start overdwelling your coils, and then they work great until they just don't.
Yeah.
Well, think about it. The
smoke comes out.
It's all resistance and voltage and amperage. You know that the way the injector driver works, it has to sync that power current. It actually provides a ground. So you have a low impedance injector.
Short, more or less. I think is the best way to explain it.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
It's getting hot because you're purposely shorting it. So the more load you put to that, the hotter it's like holding your battery cable to the ground longer. It's going to get hotter. So the more you do that over time.
Yeah, the quicker it's going to burn that driver out. And that's why you have a low impedance or a peak and hold driver in these better ECUs because they're equipped with heavier duty ground traces and everything on the board to actually accommodate that.
Better cases with heat sinks and all kinds of stuff like that.
Here's a really interesting fact. There's two different ways they do that with the drivers. Some ECUs actually have two driver chips in there. They have basically one circuit that opens for the peak, and then it has one circuit that opens for the hold, and it swaps between those two. And then some of the newer ECUs, the better ones, the Pro EFI, the Haltech, the Motec, I'm not sure what else, they actually pulse width modulate that current on the injector itself. So kind of a cool little tidbit.
Hey, Tom, if someone is running into that situation with they're going to overheat the driver, et cetera, is there anything that's going to indicate to them that that condition is beginning to happen? And, well, early warning signs, I guess?
No, it just goes dead.
Not really.
Man, you should just measure it and check and make sure you know, do I have high or low impedance injectors? And am I matching them with an ECU that supports only those or not?
Back in the day, the easy thing to do if you didn't have the right one is you could literally put some
resistor packs
in there. Or you can go steal them from an old Ford or an old Honda or something like that. But it really kills the performance of an injector.
Yeah, almost every Nissan has an injector pack. I guess the big thing too is know if your car had an injector pack, and if you're putting low impedance or high impedance injectors in it, don't leave the resistor pack in there.
So I'm going to come back to this. How would I know if that happened? What is the right way for someone who's looking at these kind of cars? How do I find that out? How do I know?
You just got to measure your impedance on your injector and know what was in there originally. Is really the only answer.
You can buy a multimeter that can measure the ohm value, and you touch the two pins together with the tips of the multimeter.
Actually, if
and
you're
you
really
can
cheap,
see
you
what the
can get them
resistance
free
is.
from Harbor Freight.
Yeah, it's enough to get an idea. Yeah, that'll tell you what your injector is, but you should be able to measure.
If it's up around 10 to 11, it's a high impedance injector. If it's down around 2 to 3, it's a low impedance injector.
If you really want to, if you don't know if you have a ballast, a resistor ballast in your car, and you're changing the injectors to high impedance, or you're putting in low impedance injectors with an ECU that can drive them, you can do a resistance check across the whole line, but that's really, you kind of need to know your car at that point. Pretty much all Nissans had them, or most Nissans.
Well, the problem is most resistor boxes are wired in on the power side. So that's a really hard
to find, easy to hide.
Yeah.
It's
a tough to do for most people.
You almost have to probe it, but you have to probe it between the ECU pin on the connector and the connector of the injector. We can measure the resistance on the power side.
It's definitely a lot harder to trace. It's usually easier to know that it's there.
You can't do that on most of them because they're on the power side. Most of them are 12 volts.
Yeah, that's true.
Most of them are 12 volts.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The power, the 12 volt side, not the actual injector ground pin.
Yeah, I was going to say,
not the control pin.
Yeah, because most of the 12 volts don't come from the injector. Usually that's on a main relay or a key switch or a fuse or something like that.
Yeah, most of them still have a 12 volt reference going back to them because the ECU will reference that exact voltage. It's usually like on the key switch, 12 volts, or depending on the car, obviously. But the ECU has to monitor that 12 volt side of it, for the offsets and whatnot that's programmed into the ECUs.
If you have an oscilloscope and have the proper probes, you can actually check and see what the driver is doing.
Yeah. Is there a domestic car that uses a ballast pack?
Not anymore. Not since like 1984.
The Fords I can't think of. There's a bunch of them that did.
Yeah. I mean, it was used a lot in the 80s, and then it'll carry over to RB25s, some JZs. I think most JZs have a injector ballast pack? I think they do. Yeah.
I didn't think they did.
No, I don't think so. I was gonna say almost.
No, actually, you're right. RBs, the 3S GTEs and an MR2.
A lot of all the Mitsubishis and whatnot, they always did.
Yeah.
And you're thinking of that external igniter dealio, the JZ.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, as I was thinking of the box, and as I said ballast pack, because that's not a ballast pack. I still throw them away, but
yes. I'm gonna change directions a little bit. We got a question: is there a rule of thumb to tell if your air-to-air intercooler is efficient enough for your application? I'm seeing an increase of about 40 to 50 degrees over ambient at the end of a quarter-mile pass. It's a treadstone unit. Doesn't know if it has a China, Bell, or Garrett core. I'm going to flash back to Bewley. Didn't he used to say 30 degrees was the limit of an efficient core over the course of a run?
On water, on air-to-air, 40 to 50 is pretty good.
Is it?
It depends on the start temperature, too.
Yeah, that's what I say. If you're starting 20 above, then yeah. But if you're starting ambient, that's...
And a lot of that depends on what boost level you're running on. If you got a 20-degree rise and you're on 40 pounds of boost, that's awesome. But if you got an 80-degree rise on 10 pounds of boost, then that's an issue.
Right. It also depends on what turbo. If that's 25 pounds on a tiny little turbo versus
Well, also
if you're out of turbo, it's going to generate more heat.
Yes.
From a flow perspective, the easiest way to actually check that is to stick another sensor in the charge pipe before the intercooler, where you can see the pressure delta across the core. Usually, the more
you can do pressure and temperature
drop,
before and after.
Well, usually the more pressure drop you have, the less efficient it's going to be, and the more heat it's going to generate, just because that pressure before the intercooler actually creates a lot more heat. More pressure is more heat. So
yeah, just if you want to go crazy, temperature and pressure before the turbo, after the intercooler, and then the manifold. We do a lot of cars that way, but a couple land speed cars and crazy turbo cars with basically modeled everything. It's overkill, but it's fun.
That's an application where you won't be able to use a Terminator X.
Yeah, that's I think I'm trying to remember. So this is Jeff, the one I'm thinking of, the last one I did this on.
It's nice to have those IOs in the back pocket if you do want to do something like that. Because if you have a Dominator, you can be like, oh, that's a cool idea. I should go rig up cheap pressure and temperature sensors, pre and post intercooler, and log them. That's like a one afternoon project if you already have your Dominator.
That stuff's really nice when you have a problem. You know what I mean? Like, if we have an issue, we just find out what it is. Well, let's put a temp sensor here. Let's put a temp sensor there. Let's do this. Let's do that.
Yeah,
we found a collapsed core in an intercooler thanks to a before intercooler pressure sensor. Right, the guy didn't have one. He was having a boost problem. We added a sensor before, made a pull, and could instantly see that the problem was that he was making about 40 pounds before, and 10 pounds was making it through the intercooler. And at that point, it's very obvious there's a problem. We knew he wasn't out of turbo because it was fine previously, and that told us right there it was collapsed. We ended up cutting the thing open, and literally all the epoxy that they had used, all the stuff they had done internally to mount that core had just fallen apart, and it was just a big clog in the bottom of the thing, basically.
We had something similar happen, except it wasn't the core. Somebody shoved some red rags in there so they wouldn't get shit in their intake pipe, and they never removed them. And just
I've seen that more times than you ever should. But either that
T-shirt in the intake's a good one too.
Yeah.
Never done that. Nope. Never done that.
I just wanted to say one other thing since we were talking about injectors and resistor packs. If you have a resistor pack and you want to remove it, it's usually very easy. Typically, all you got to do is cut all the wires off, and you can just connect them all together, and it's gone. It's that simple. It's really not a big deal.
If you're lazy on all of the popular Japanese cars, someone makes a bypass block as well. If you don't want to cut and splice a bunch of wires, or if you can cut and splice and do a shitty job, just buy the jump pack too, because then one of us will wind up under your dash having to fix that.
Guys, winding down. Oh man, Chris Smith says we're doing good things. It means we're getting way too nerdy. We got to steer it back to normal.
I was going to read Barrett's question, and this one might be a Tom question as well. How often do you see injectors with 16 injector setups? Example: one injector failing lean out cylinder, while 16 Bosch 210s enough volume on methanol.
Very rare to have that happen with the Bosch based ones that I've seen.
I will say this before the Tom,
unless they're fake.
Yes.
Bosch.
I prefer not to have to use the Holley add-on module because I have had it not turn on as commanded a couple times. And the Holley Dominator will run dual 210s per channel on its own. It has enough go. So I would prefer to do it just 16 injectors wired together as a single set, if that makes sense. But I'll let Tom expound on that as to if he's seen those issues.
I actually missed the question. I only caught the back half of it.
Someone asking if how many issues you've seen with dual injector setups, one injector failing, leaning out of cylinder, stuff on those lines.
It's really not that common because usually if something happens, it affects more than just one. Because like real Bosch stuff typically just doesn't fail. You know, I mean, there's usually a cause for it. So usually not an issue. The fake stuff, probably a big problem.
And the quantity of fake out there is a lot larger than most of these people want to believe.
So usually if you're going to have a problem on a single injector, it's typically wiring.
Or filtration.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say filtration's the biggest thing. Hey, it's the end of the year, guys. So any of you guys that you're putting your car away for the winter, you're on E85, drain that shit out, put some pump gas in, run the car for 10 minutes, and then be happy in March when you bring the car back out. If not, you'll be sending your shit in to get checked.
If not, you'll be sending it back to Tom to be cleaned and flowed.
Well, Speaking of that, I have not been thinking about that.
And it's more than just the injectors. It's the fuel lines, it's the fuel filters, it's everything in the whole system. So, just a good idea.
Tom, it's not just a matter of turning on the pumps and running some regular gasoline through it. It's a matter of actually lighting it off and running it to get it all cleaned out of the injectors themselves.
Yep, it needs to go through the injectors themselves.
That's usually something I recommend to guys when they're running flex fuel or anything like that. Run some pump gas through it every once in a while, even if it's just letting it sit there idle and pump gas.
I will tell you, Tom told me something a while back where, I have an injector cleaning machine here, and it's whenever you're cleaning injectors, flow on the opposite fuel. So if they run ethanol, flow on gas. If they run methanol, flow on gas. Or if they run gas, I'll flow on methanol. Just to clean injectors out. Dude, let me tell you something. You haven't seen anything like the shit that will come out of a methanol injector when you run about 10, 20 seconds of 93 through that son of a gun. That you literally things you can see come out of the injector.
Yeah, it happens.
You can flip them and run them the other way around too and get some more crap out of them from inside the body.
So we have a moment here. I want to explain what's going on. I've been showing pictures of this all night, but I've been comparing two types of George Dickel. Now, you might say, why would I do that? Well, this bottled in bond is aged 11 years and was distilling season fall 2008. On the other hand, this one has a completely different label, fuckers, and yet it does share that it was distilled fall season 2005. So I'm more or less dealing with a 15-year-old and a 10 or 11-year-old. They label it as 11. That's interesting to me when it says 2006, but who knows? In any event,
I've been tasting whiskey that cost me $26.
And it tastes like peanut butter?
Tastes like peanut butter. It's amazing.
Oh, God, help me. The good news is George Dickel bottled in bond, if you can buy it right, costs about $32. So there. Really interesting. Believe it or not, the younger stuff is winning tonight so far. Oh, gosh, look at that. All you need for that is some Reese's cups. Just dump them in there, put them in the blender. Vroom. What's anybody else having tonight?
I'm not drinking anything currently.
I'm a bitch. I got water.
I got a root beer.
There is a
red bottle.
Oh, okay. Don't take. Any guys drink Land Shark?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
What?
Take a Land Shark. Take a sip off the top. Pour a shot of amaretto in it, and taste it. I swear to God, it'll turn the beer into Dr. Pepper.
I don't know if I want my beer to taste like Dr. Pepper though. Like I like Dr. Pepper, but
I'm sorry, I'm ignorant and old and stupid. What the is Land Shark?
It's a beer. It's a beer.
it's a put it in the same class. It's like a beach beer. It's in the same category as not quite Corona, but it's in that leaning, I guess.
Where's it from?
I honestly don't know.
There's your first problem.
Take cider of choice, Angry Orchard, Magners, Woodchuck, and mix it 50-50 with Dos Equis over ice. It'll get you drunk faster than anything else out there.
Oh, dude, I'll pour you a Booker's and Coke, and we'll see. Oh my God!
Tequila, and I don't know how to tell you about 3 or 4 shots of that tequila, and yeah, it's a good day. It's
Which
a really
tequila,
good,
Mike?
sir.
Cool.
What was it? I couldn't see it.
Oh, I don't know. I was actually my phone, but whatever that tequila, I have the bottle. I go grab the bottle. Whatever the tequila Bill sent me, 3 or 4 shots of that will put you in a good place. Let me tell you something.
And
normally tequila shows everybody else what I had for lunch. The only tequila I've actually been able to keep down is the one that George Strait actually makes.
Really?
I could have dealt without that image, but okay.
Well, his tequila is actually really, really good, and it's the only one that doesn't make me throw up.
Guys, this is what happens. You don't give us tech questions. We talk about alcohol. So if you want tech questions.
So I didn't realize that Jimmy Buffett basically brought he started the whole Land Shark thing. I'm trying to read now because I was curious. I know AB Jerry mentions AB InBev owns it, like they own fucking 3/4 or 90% of the beer industry, for better or worse. Yeah, I'm trying to. So they listed as a Margaritaville brand. I'm trying to figure out what where the actual beer came from and if he just licensed another beer.
Well, AB InBev, for those who aren't following along with corporate acquisitions, AB stands for Anheuser-Busch. It was a reverse acquisition. However, the InBev folks out of Brazil were the ones that actually bought Anheuser-Busch, as in Bud and all that. So sometimes difficult to tell the players without a scorecard.
Kind of saddening, isn't it? Like the biggest beer company is no longer American. That's just, I don't know why. I don't drink beer, but that still hurts for some reason.
Here you go. How about T4 housing versus V-band turbine housing flow advantages? I see it mostly as packaging. If there is a flow advantage, it's probably very minimal. In general, it's packaging. Either you're using V-bands everywhere, or you need the square flange with 4 bolts. Just however you need to mount it.
This makes me so history on Land Shark beer. Basically, Jimmy Buffett's manager, that CEO of Margaritaville, basically who manages all of his stuff, made a deal with Seagram about a bunch of other alcohol to make Parrot Bay rum and all that stuff and the Margaritaville stuff. And they basically, all his stuff was sponsored by Corona before. They wanted to brand their own. So Seagram and AB InBev made Land Shark for Jimmy Buffett to have his official Margaritaville beer. So it's a very corporate made beer. So that's straight up an AB InBev.
So I had to go buy another bottle because I finished the one Bill sent me. But this right here, this tequila right here, that many a night where I didn't make it all the way to my bed off of that bottle of tequila.
You're welcome, and I apologize at the same time. Conversely, blue Gatorade, dude.
Yeah. I got no other choice tonight, man. I keep forgetting to go out and get something, especially for Jason, because he's the beer drinker.
I swear to God, we could have had you like cases of Mango-Ritas or whatever the fuck they were.
Dude, I'm starting to get sick of those, man. Everybody sent us those. And
I was bringing them to a class.
Oh, a whole bunch of people brought them to classes, and it's like, oh, thanks, Heartburn Central.
Not that you would want to do this, but you can mix Gatorade 50-50 with vodka, and you can't tell.
So interesting.
Actually, I realized Jerry mentioned
Bill's
he had a
Guide to
question earlier
Functional
that we missed.
Alcoholism.
Actually, welcome to how you mess with your friends after athletic events. But never mind.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Hope that was in the 70s.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
What else we got? What did I miss while I was away?
Jerry brought up a question. He asked us earlier, and I saw it, and I forgot about it. Basically, has a burble or pop on decel on the big end of the drag strip where dyno tuning didn't touch. Any advice on tuning that out? It's probably just because you weren't decelling it as much on the dyno. I guess what ECU and stuff like that. I would assume that's just a decel cut.
So usually, I mean, a lot of drag cars don't do the decel cut, but a lot of methanol guys will have that problem. Number one, look at your fuel delivery. Make sure when you're on the decel that you're not dumping a lot of fuel, and you want basically enough, same pulse width as what it would idle on. That's number one. And number two, have a lot of timing in the decel area. Like a typical LS wants like 45, 50 degrees of advance in the decel area. Turn the gas off, Chris Smith. Yes, he's right.
The burble tunes are all done just by taking all the timing out.
What I always do, like
the other side, but
on my personal car, I have trouble at the beginning of the track. The dang hood's trying to blow off, so the dang thing's trying to catch on fire anyway from the hood stacks that come out of it. So I don't want any flames coming out of it at all. Whenever I snap off the throttle, because once fiberglass goes up, it's done. But I always go like above, I don't know, 6,000 RPM, whatever RPM you're decelling at.
Cut it off.
And, the low vacuum points, just look at a data log, see where the map sensor's at, what RPM it's at, and just zero the table out there.
Go find those cells in the fuel table and cut them out. I like that better than fuel cut, because fuel cuts always seem to do weird shit. Like if you don't watch them like on the two-step, or you get a weird behavior, or you have to pedal it or something like that during a pass. I don't like the fuel coming and going on a car, on a drag car anyway.
So I almost never run decel cut or anything like that on the drift cars, because they make them act really screwy on any kind of transient throttle. Especially you got a car up on a wall and a guy wants to pedal the car a little bit. The last thing I want to do is get it to be a little upset.
Well, it seems like the
don't
decel
bullshit us. Don't bullshit us. You're doing that for style points. You got to get the flames.
But
we do that other ways. Yeah, I don't run decel cut.
That's a maintenance throttle kind of thing, right? Not to mention the style points part, though, right, Brian?
Yeah, it's come a long way. Like there's a lot of times a guy has gone out and they're like, yeah, the car's just it's not smooth at these points, and it's always a point where I know they're making a correction or lifting off the throttle a little bit. So there's a little bit of balance there, and any kind of aggressive decel cut or pulling fuel out or anything like that gets real funky with the way the car is driving.
Scott Evans, I read what you said, but you won't say it out loud.
Ruh-roh.
I was busy typing, so I didn't want to have clickety-clack going on. I get rid of that by just killing the ignition, because I want to read the plugs at the end of the track. I want to see what the engine's doing. I want to find out if I got one hole that's way off kilter or something.
Hey, Scott, I want to ask a clarifying question on that. Are you literally just killing the ignition, or do you have a remote power shut off, or what are you doing?
I have switches to kill spark and fuel on my car.
Okay.
So I kill both.
Okay.
I have Will. Will just reaches up and kills the ignition, kills power to them and to the grid off the car. Cross the finish line, throttle still to the floor, kill the ignition, pull the chute.
Anybody else have a particular thing that they do along those lines? I think this is an interesting little thing we never talk about, but it's kind of a big deal.
Pull the chute while still in the throttle.
Yes.
Because if you're off the throttle when you pull the chute, it can upset the chassis, and then you'll end up in the wall.
Do you drive? Are you saying you drive into the chute, Scott?
Drive into the chute, absolutely.
And do you
I think that's setup dependent.
Air launcher or a spring or a pilot?
Air launchers. There's no reason for a spring in today's world anymore.
Except if you have rules.
I have the generic cheapy one, and it falls out the back with the spring that's built into the chute pack.
The pilot chute.
Oh Lord, really?
Yep, works fine.
This is me crossing myself that I'm not Catholic.
Yeah,
wow.
If you guys are not rule dependent and you have the option to run an air launcher, you put an air launcher on the car. It's from packing to the way it launched, everything about it is just better.
The packing reloading.
Yeah, it's a lot
is
easier
night
with an
and
air
day.
launcher.
And the
Sorry,
driver
Scott?
always packs his own chute. Don't let the driver get lazy and have you pack the chute for him. That's his ass. He packs his own chute every pass.
That's right. His life, his shoot.
Yep.
Yeah, True
Angel-
Street makes
Angel does
that
mine.
a real big deal. When you're running True Street, it's really nice to have an air launcher as opposed to a spring, because it's really sucks because you're in that return lane next to the track and it's all you. James, I had a question. This is kind of tangentially related to your setting your hood on fire question or comment. When you're talking about what we're loosely going to call the downpipe, do you guys pay any attention to where that ends up in terms of how much it clears the deck, clears the hood? Because if you're in a low pressure area versus a high pressure area, all that's going to act very differently. Is that anything that came into your thinking about that stuff?
Yeah, actually, we the way the pipes are designed, they actually kind of flip up and have kind of a lip on the back side of them, and it actually, natural position sits about 2.5 inches above the hood. But I really need to get a belly pan on the car, because whenever the car launches, the way my car works anyway, it just lifts up and it gets a lot of air under the car. So I really need a chin splitter or something on the front bumper to kind of deflect that air around instead of going under the car, because the hood ends up catching all of it. And, it just is what it is. Plus the hood's cracked in a few different spots, so it's not very structural anyway. So I'm waiting for the day for it to just suck it off there and go up in the sky, and then I won't have to worry about a hood anymore. But
I recall
I had a
seeing
great
pictures
pass
of,
where I
ahead, Scott.
wished that I had somebody that had a camera, because I had a hood that split in half because it was cracked. It didn't all come off. The top layer of the hood came off. The bottom stayed on the car. The top layer went up about 80 feet in the air and came down somewhere else. Somebody brought it back to me in the pits. Hey, here's half your hood.
Oh, I've had that
So-
happen. That's funny. That's weird because of those 2-layer hoods. I recall pictures of Larry Larson's car, the Nova, going through the lights at a little over 200 with the front wheels off the ground. And after that, he quietly added a splitter under the bumper. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a big deal, James, but there's some things you can do, and you'll actually pick up a little ET if you can keep the air from going under the car and increasing the drag, and
Yep.
get the air to go up and over the car instead of through the car.
Oh, trust me, if I had a Fox body or a Mustang, it would already have that kind of stuff on there. Unfortunately, it's like pulling teeth trying to find a carbon or some kind of front bumper for a Camaro.
The entire drag race parts building organization, companies everywhere, industry has forgotten about the 4th gen F body. Like the car just doesn't exist.
Yeah, like
Every
Mike
other-
Kostick's the only one I know of that makes one.
Every other car out there, you can find parts for anything in the world you want that. But you go into 4th gen F body, which it's not like they're short. It's not like there's not a lot of them out there racing. Those parts just do not exist for them.
The last 2 times I went to the track, there were more 4th gen, 5th gen F body stuff out there than there was Fox body.
Hey,
I mean,
sorry.
they're getting cheap enough and they get cut up.
So
Kenny
I hear
Howard's getting
business
mad at us for not
opportunity
answering
those
this
of you who
question.
are listening. Ding,
Sorry.
ding, ding.
Kenny, where's Kenny? Kenny, who's talking?
Kenny Howard, I had to scroll back because Kenny's a buddy of mine. He's like, man, you're missing my question. And I keep scrolling back up on YouTube, and he's asked it like an hour ago. But here's a blower tuning question. Non-intercooled VorTech car with methanol injection, do you want the inlet air temp sensor before the nozzle or after the methanol nozzle, that is? And how would you go about tuning to keep things safe depending? I would probably feel my way through that one. I'd probably put it after the nozzle, just to be interesting to see. But I would make sure I knew if it was getting wet or not.
Yes.
So if
Wet bulb syndrome.
go from there.
Is there a way to test to see if the sensor's getting wet?
Yeah, huge temperature drops that almost don't make sense would probably indicate that it's getting wet. You could probably test it after a pass, pull it out.
Temp drop that stays after the methanol kit shut off.
Okay.
Hey, I don't know. It
I like
depends.
that.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know. I kind of sneak up on those. I try to make it so the methanol isn't becoming a supplemental fuel very much. So I'm not having to do huge corrections when the methanol is running. And then I'll kind of observe what's going on with the inlet air temps.
Well, a lot of that depends what you're using the methanol for. Are you using it for
Right.
supplemental fueling, or are you just using it to kill IAT? Or
Cool some air
combination of
charge.
those? Exactly.
Yeah, I would
If
think,
you're using it
well, the way I
for-
usually set them up is I'll set the meth nozzle as close to the head unit as possible, and then put the inlet temp, either in the manifold or right around the throttle body. That
Right
way
around the
there's
throttle
plenty
body,
of
yeah.
distance, because it should evaporate by the time it gets to that point, if it has enough heat.
I want the nozzle as far away from the manifold as possible so it can remove all the heat as possible and evaporate completely before it gets to the intake. I don't want it to be any liquid in the intake because that causes distribution issues. You're still going to get a little bit depending on how much you're spraying, but the further away you go, the better it's going to be for distribution. I always want the intake temperature sensor afterwards and in a spot where I'm not worried about that liquid getting onto it. And in general, I'm only spraying enough to cool the air. Once I see the temperature stop, I'm not spraying anymore. I'm not trying to just put in a big nozzle. I'm going to figure out what it takes. And usually it ends up being in a relationship that ends up 10 to 15% of what your total fuel volume is. The big thing is knowing your fuel volume. You have to calculate how many pounds per hour of fuel you're using at wide open throttle before you start spraying methanol. And then you just take that number, divide by 10, you figure out the nozzle that gets you close to that amount when it's fully wide open.
I still say the best methanol injection point is pre-compressor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love to do it pre-compressor, but it can be hard on the wheel depending on how you spray it in.
It can be hard on the wheel, and it can also be like a centrifuge, and it can sling it out of take it out of suspension.
Well, that's an interesting thing to test for. There's a comment here that Derek Woods made, pardon me, on YouTube. James Short experienced what mine does. Rear of hood wants to come off down track, lost the chin splitter one pass at a race, and next pass without almost flew off. I think everybody needs to remember some basic airflow and aerodynamic issues, which is there's a high pressure area at the nose of the car. And then at the base of the windshield, there's another high pressure area, but in the middle, there's a part that wants to literally take the hood and turn it into a bow. You see the same thing having driven a convertible at the track. You see convertibles, the top all puffs out. So be aware that there's usually net lift on a hood. So you have to take into account the fact that aerodynamically, especially if your cars that run a little bit nose high, it's net lift on the hood. So pay attention to aerodynamics. If nothing else, use your video cameras. If worse than that, video camera plus yarn strips. But understand what your car is doing at speed, and you can tune out a lot of things and go faster for free.
That wasn't me.
I've done it like 3 times this one, but I don't think anyone heard me yet.
Heard that one. That was nice. So anyway. What is Sewell? Are you driving, Sewell? He's out working on his car. What the hell is that picture of? It's when his hood flew off. Tom just sent me.
Yeah, that's a picture of when my hood came off like a couple years back.
Kind of hard to tell, but I'll try to share it here. Hold on a second here. So, share this one. Okay. There's when Tom's hood flew up. Oh, dude, that sucks.
Whoops. That came up at 160.
Oh, did it break your windshield?
Yeah, I broke the windshield. That's why Seabiscuits got we had a race the next night lined up. And I didn't have another hood, so I just beat the hood down and then spot welded it back in and then kind of left it. I never put another one back on.
Hang on. Are we going to approach legend status? Did you Ace Ventura that son of a bitch to a stop?
Oh, yes, I did. Hell yeah, I did.
Wow, that's cool.
Legend status. That's awesome.
So by the way, a lot of cars, we run triple pins across the front just because flopsy hoods will do that, either separate into pieces or other stuff. Land speed racing will teach you a lot about what happens to flimsy parts at speed.
Yep.
There we go.
So what else? Man, it's kind of nice to have the comments up. We're going to work on having the Facebook comments up maybe in the next week or two, as well as the YouTube comments, but that's kind of cool. I like that.
That'll be an interesting thing. This is really pretty. I mean, it looks really good.
Thank you, Jason, our producer.
Thank you, Jason. Of course, then
makes it
if
way
there's
nicer
more
not having to
comments
jump
showing
around
there's
screens
less of us,
watching,
so oh no.
Sorry, say that again, Brian. What did he say?
So it's nice being able to see kind of all the chat from one spot.
Yeah, we're working on that, trying to get all of them
YouTube
together.
and
It's a trick.
Yeah.
We're working on that. We got the phase 1 going here, so always trying to make little improvements. It's pretty hilarious. We've taken some great strides in the video department in the last couple of months. So,
hey, since we're winding down, I'm going to be greedy for a second. I sold my all-wheel drive Mustang Dyno last weekend, and if you guys know anybody that has a Mustang 1750 or a 248 Dyno Jet for sale, let me know. I would be interested.
Gotcha.
That's the big roller.
Everybody knows some dynos for sale. But yeah, you want the big roller stuff for the Mustang, the 1750. That's what we had at Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite
cool
dyno
dyno
ever. That was my favorite dyno ever. That big roller thing, it would record some big numbers and repeat them. It's the same one that Scott Travis has down in Carrier, Mississippi, right outside of New Orleans. We've done classes there. Dude, we've done big power pro mods on that thing.
I know everybody's going to the pods, but man, I really like the big roller stuff. It hooks well. It loads
I don't
good.
like hub
Everything
dynos.
works.
Everybody knows I hate hub dynos, man. I'm not a fan.
I was going to buy one and then changed my mind. I want an old school big roller model.
Good call. If you can score one or set up dual eddies on that 1750, that is the money. It's expensive, but that's the one to do.
Yeah, you can
put a
2,500
wheel horsepower car.
1750.
Yeah, you could put a 2,300 wheel horsepower car on there with big slicks and air them up a little bit, and it'll catch it and repeat.
Yeah, we had one down at Earl's, and it repeated it was perfect, like all the time, never a problem. The only problems we ever had is because he's in Louisiana, and when it floods, it's like when it rains, like you get 6 feet of water underground, so you got to have a sump in there all the time running to take care of the water coming in from everywhere because, sea level's 2 feet below the dyno. And the only problems we ever had is one time the sump died and a couple of the pieces on the eddy brake broke or burn out, and you bypass them and it still works just the same. It's super easy to deal with when you have to. They're easy to replace. The sensor's easy to replace and calibrate. Super simple software to work with. By far my favorite.
Hey, Scott Clark, there was a question some time ago about classes up north. Given what season we're heading into, what's the prognosis on that?
Maybe in the spring, guys. We'll see. I mean, right now, if you can get a group of local guys together to kind of help us out, it's hard to do classes just out of the blue. But if you get a local group of guys, 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 guys to kind of kickstart things, give me a call. Scott at realtuners.com. Send an email. And we'll talk about doing a class, but right now it's got to be more of the privately arranged ones like that, as opposed to, this one we're doing in Little Rock, Arkansas is a little bit of a similar deal. They had 10 or 12 guys that committed to go, and then we were able to fill the remaining 8 or 10 seats. And speaking of which, there's 4 seats left for that event, November 7th and 8th in Little Rock, Arkansas. Check it out at realtuners.com. But it's tough to get catering, and it's tough to get table and chair rentals. A lot of those businesses are just closed down or not doing it, or COVID limited, or business is hurting so bad it's not worth doing it. It's hard to find someone that wants to do a group of 30 people for 2 days. It's become a lot more difficult to do the classes. But
Kevin Smith, he's waiting.
If he wants to do one, I'll talk to doing one at Kevin's here in the next 2 months or something like that, because the weather's nice down there, right?
Yep.
Maybe we'll do a class in Orlando, or is he Orlando area? He's actually
Gainesville.
Gainesville, sorry. Okay. Flights are cheap though still, but consider that. We'll let you know here. This is the place to get the class announcement first. I generally do them on the podcast first. What else? Other questions?
I'm reading. I'm looking at a picture from the duck race. Ron Rhodes had the motor out of his car, laid down on the flywheel, So the motor plate's sticking up, and he's slamming pistons in it on the floor of his trailer. That's the kind of shit you have to do if you want to be number one. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh yeah, that's the Rhodes brothers, if you know Ronnie. It's also nitrous.
Yes.
Which that's just a commitment. Jeez.
I believe it was Hancock's team said they had gone through a case of pistons in the 12 days of duck.
Case of
12
pistons.
days of duck.
I'm not even sure what a case of
They
pistons
sell
means.
pistons by the case.
Well, when you order custom pistons, because a lot of us run heads that don't exactly exist, you have to order them 10 at a time, which is the most asinine thing in the world considering we run V8s. But yes, I have to order my pistons 10 at a time, and I believe a case is 20, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So if you have to replace pistons all the time, it means you're on the ragged edge, and ragged edge does not necessarily mean you are making more power by increasing the timing that far. Just remember that. Sometimes making parts last is actually making more power.
We're talking
more timing, always more power.
That are spraying, not to speak in pounds per hour, let's talk in horsepower. We're talking guys that are spraying 1,800 horsepower with the nitrous here. This is your average 300-400 horsepower.
Sure, I get that, but there's a point where if you're replacing a case that often, you might want to do some reinvestigating on what the timing should really be at that point.
Well, those guys are winning races too, so a case of pistons is chump change for them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like buying spark plugs. You know what I mean? You just bring them along and toss them in and out.
Sounds
Pretty much part of the deal.
Keep a spray bottle
in HRA, doesn't it?
Yeah, you keep a spray bottle full of muriatic acid in the trailer. If you don't understand why, you're probably not a nitrous guy.
Dude, I'm a two-stroke guy. We did that mid-race all the time. Like, if you didn't have pistons in you,
You know,
run it lean, and when you win, replace the piston.
yeah, it's kind of life. You know, if you're not eating one or two a pass, you're probably not trying that hard.
Something like that. Jeez. All right, what else? Don't make
I
me
remember
wrap
someone
up.
looked at me once. Was like, "What are you talking about?" Like, dude, I rebuild my engine in 45 minutes on my dirt bike.
Wow.
I'll eat that piston and win that moto every single time.
All right, to everybody that's listening, we need your good questions now, or we're going to call it a night.
Right.
When Duck's standing on the starting line with a clear briefcase full of $100,000 in cash money.
Oh yeah, you line that shit up, whatever it takes.
Yep, I'm lighting all 8 on fire.
No offense to Daddy
The
Dave.
finish line before it stops.
Hey, when you
No
can't
offense
burn
to
any
Daddy
more,
Dave, but that's what I call the tune-up, the Daddy Dave tune-up.
hey, when you can't
Daddy
burn
Dave
any more
too.
nitrous, you're like, fuck this, we're just gonna burn the pistons too.
Right.
In the power,
Hey, it'll go really fast for a minute before they let go. So.
That's all you need.
in the power grid, there's a setting when you pull time based off the input wire as to how long you want the timing to fall out. Like, so, you know, if kit comes on, you want it to fall out over 2/10, 3/10. That way all the timing doesn't come out one at a time. And that's when those numbers get really, really large. Like, oh, I'll have the timing fall out of that one over 1.3.
All right. I think we're going to let everybody go here. I tell you, so check out this video that we were messing around with. We did the in-car video of Rick Lind. This was an aborted pass, but Jason's going to queue up this video. We'll send everybody out with that. But everybody have a good night. Guys, stick around. We'll talk here for a little bit afterwards.
This video kills. Stay for this.
Let's stay for this. It's pretty cool. Go ahead, Jason. I get it with reading movie. And that's where it loses crank sync. Oh well. So anyway, we were having problems with the reluctor wheel touching the sensor due to crank flex. We're working on that for the next trip. But pretty neat deal. So cool. Well, we can roll out. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We should probably, I think we'll see you next week. Yeah, next Wednesday. We'll try to get a guest back on here. We'll take your suggestions for guests. Leave us a message. Let us know. Everybody have a good one. And we'll see you next week.